no bad idea is bad. You can't do any negative feeling here. Just let's get them in the bucket. And then take a break, come back, and have everybody prioritize in their mind 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that you have the best ones rise to the top.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sarah Box, your host, and today's guest is no stranger to thinking big, acting boldly, and disrupting the status quo. But he does it with humor, insight, and I'm told $1 billion smile. So if you're looking at this on YouTube, you can be the judge of that for yourself. Our guest is Terry Rich. He is a visionary entrepreneur, a global keynote speaker, and the former CEO of the Iowa Lottery. I have questions about that.
Lucky numbers, right?
Yeah. Hey, we have it next door to, we don't have it here. We have gambling, but right next door, another state. Terry's career, though, spans cable television to corporate boardrooms, government agency, to game shows. And yes, he's been on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and he's given away over $1 billion legally. And we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to ask Terry to talk to us about how innovation can be fun, how failure is often the first step to success, and how organizations, including nonprofits, can use COT, creativity, opportunity, and teamwork, not to just get by, but to thrive. So with that, as a brief introduction, let's formally welcome Terry Rich to the podcast. Hey, Terry.
So nice to be here. Let's have some fun.
Let's have some fun. So I'm going to start with a quote that you said, success is like cocaine. What do you mean by that? And how can we balance the drive for success without becoming addicted to the chase?
Well, I think that I found out that anytime you have success in your life, it really drives you. And everybody would love to start their own company. Everybody has a project they're trying to do. And often people quit too early. And I found that when I had success, all of a sudden, when I got into cable television, it was fun. We couldn't touch anything that seemed not to turn to gold. I realized we had a lot of failures, but boys were encouraged to keep trying and keep pushing. And when they cashed us out, when I was age 40, all of a sudden coming off the farm, I had all the money, I had all the fun, all the travel that I thought I'd ever have. What do you do there? And that's why I say that happiness really happens on the way to success. And you work really hard, and because when you have that kind of success, you don't want to give it up. I have a real tough time. I wish I would have learned early in life how to relax, because once you've had that success, I say it's like cocaine. I've never done cocaine. You realize you just want it again, and you want to keep going after it. And balancing that with work-life attitudes is a real important thing to learn early in life.
Well, you talk about needing to enjoy what you do. And so when you talk about that balance for success, and I have struggled, I come around. It's like one time it looked like this, the next time it looked like that, because I changed my definition or the stage of life you're in, right? So how do you figure it out? Because you talked about you make a decision. So it didn't sound like leaving the network was necessarily your choice, but the network changed or the cable changed. Is that right?
That's right. It got bought out. Actually, it was the greatest thing that ever happened, because for some reason, when I got hired as a real small company, they didn't have much money. So they were giving me these things called stock options, and our 401k were stock. And then we were being paid by the same company. If it had gone under, I'd have lost everything. But instead, when they cashed out, I got more money than my dad ever had, that I'd ever thought I would ever have. And I wanted to get more. And kind of crazy thing that people find is you really work hard and you buy that big boat or you buy that nice house. There's always going to be somebody around the corner that has a bigger house, a bigger boat. Yeah. And so you have to realize you got to enjoy what you have and enjoy what to look at. So that's why you want to do things that you like. So we'll talk a little bit about what to do when that success comes and how to compound on that to keep the drive going, but yet work hard to be home and do give back. Yeah. And that's where the old zoo comes into play.
Well, and I think that's a great place to go to next, because you turned around the Iowa Zoo, and it says that turnaround and the lottery, it is Friday. Holy moly. No, it's not.
The lottery.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the lottery, your turnaround and the Iowa Zoo lottery are both legendary. But what lessons specifically can nonprofits draw from your leadership style in these very different sectors? Because I know I've worked with nonprofits that said we could do basically what would be considered a lottery, which would be considered illegal. So how can you talk a little bit about both the turnaround of the zoo and how the lottery came in to be with that?
From the start, when I started in cable television, and then when we cashed out, I started my own companies. I started 4 or 5 companies till I was 50. And I got to the point where I realized I've had success, but what have I really got in life? And what have I done? What have I given back? I want to make sure nobody says they wish they had spent less time with their kids, but you want to be time with family and that sort of thing. And I want to give back. And I got a call from a governor who said, hey, you're a promoter, you're a marketer. Would you be interested in running a zoo? Well, I grew up on a farm, so running a zoo can't be that much different. So I went into something I'd never done before. I had no idea what to do with a giraffe, what to do with all these, but I'd fed a cow, so I thought maybe I had a little bit. So you instinctively fall back on the things that you know how to do, and that's promotion, that's marketing, and it's strong business indications. The zookeepers really, really loved the zoo, but they wanted, every time there was money to be had, they wanted to spend it on the animals. They didn't realize spending it on something that could grow the business, how important that is to be able to make even more to do that. And once I found success in my own companies, I realized that I always wanted to do a lot of big companies all do research and development, right? Yeah. So I figured out that when I had success with the very first company I owned, I took 10% of it and I used that as my research and development. I looked for the craziest next new idea, because if I lost it, I still had 90% of the money, right? And so, you do the new, and I started a radio station that made money. So I then took 10% of that money and started something new. So each time I was looking for new ideas. So when you got to a zoo, to a nonprofit, most people have one focus. The zoo's focus was getting kids to the zoo, right? Well, I realized you have every 2 to 12-year-old, and they weren't making money. They were still losing money through the gate. So we said, how can we make money? They said, well, if you just spend $2 million, you could get another animal and people would come. Well, you can't spend $2 million if you don't have $2 million. So we said, what do we have that we own that we could promote? And they said, well, all of our animals poop. So we decided to do an exhibit, Scoop on Poop. It actually cost us $0. And all the kids would come in, they'd laugh, they'd scream, and they'd tell all their friends. We get more and more people through the door. The other thing we did was, because it was owned by the city before we took it over as a nonprofit, they were only charging $3 or $4, thinking you've got to give it away so everybody has access. I said, no, all the zoos around us were $25, $35, $40 to get in. Let's go up to $9.95. And then anybody that walks in the door, if the mom says, we told the people at the front desk, mom says, oh man, I don't know if we can afford this, just let them in free, because everybody coming from around our area is used to $20, $30 a pop. We're cheap. And all of a sudden, the cash flow just started coming in, all of the good things that were going on. The other thing that most people don't realize, that we talked about taking a portion and looking at what could be our new audience, because anyone who has a 2 to 12-year-old will be at our zoo. But we need to get the young adults. We call them millennials in those days. Well, how do we get millennials in? So we brainstorm. And this is kind of where we're going to talk a little later about COT, COT, and what that meant and what we figured out. But we said, what do millennials like? Just like, what did we have free? What do millennials like? Well, they like booze. Well, okay. Well, then and they don't like little kids. So let's shut the zoo down at night. Let's keep the animals out, and let's bring in and have booze, and let's have a band, and let's make it a really cool date night, because the weather, you're outdoors, you're not in a smoky bar. And all of a sudden, we became the hip place to go from around the community, and we became the second largest cultural attraction in the whole state that I lived in. Now, that's important, but what's even more important is people like success. Yeah. So when you're out as a nonprofit trying to raise money from people who have the dollars and wherewithal to do it, they don't want to invest in something. I was in the journalism department, and the head of the journalism department said, when I leave, this place is going to shut down. Now, anybody want to donate some money for our new TV cameras or whatever? No, I'll invest if I know you're going to grow and you're going to be successful and live on your own. not just depend on people's money to do that. So the whole idea of when this thing really took off, and then we became the second largest cultural attraction, all of a sudden everybody was donating money to the zoo because it was a cool place to be a part of.
And wanting to be associated with it would be cool also. I have a follow-up question to that. So you called your Scoop on Poop was the name of that. What was the name of your millennials night out with booze?
Zoo Brew. We called it Zoo Brew.
I figured you'd have a name for it.
The beauty of failure is if you just realize you can't, every idea you have, even the best idea, probably may not work the first time. So we look for all these different things as we were doing the Scoop on Poop, but one that really worked well that we just said out of the blue, we've got poop, and we realized we have all these white-tailed deer in our state, and they were eating all the flowers of everybody. But we also, we had tigers, and the tigers' poop was a natural repellent for all of these white-tailed deer. So we started selling buckets of poop for $20, and we made 20 grand that summer.
That is so innovative. So innovative. Because it's true, like they'll say, put this type of urine around your yard, these animals won't come across it and stuff. And you had a ready-made farm full of poop.
Natural predators that the prey would avoid. So
who wants to come into a lion,
Yeah. Now, I got to tell you the one failure I had, though. So the zoo did really, really well. And it's important people understand failure is the first step to success. If you think about when we sent 3 astronauts to the moon, people are project managers. Big word is project managers in most organizations. So you set up the timetable, you get the budget, you get the people you need. You say, okay, let's do it. In 3 months, we're going to have success, right? Well, think about when they sent 3 men to the moon, they were off course over 90% of the time. So if they would have followed the project managers with one failure, it doesn't work, they would have said 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. We'll see you in 3 months. But no, they course corrected over 90% of the time to make that successful. If you take that in, you think about when you try a new project or you try something new, you reevaluate, you get everybody around, and you find ways to adjust it. Too many people have the $1 million idea. They try it, they fail, and they say, I just can't do it. I don't have it in me.
So, but when do you know that enough is enough? Because you talked early on about how, you could quit and you're just short of turning the corner on success, right? I just had this conversation last week with someone said, I just feel like it's time for me to stop, right, in what they were particularly doing. And I said, but then when do you really know that if you just did this one next thing, that might be and I don't have an answer to it, so I'm coming to you for the answer I should have offered.
Sarah, I think you hit it on the nose when you said when you don't have the next step. It's important when you start a new company. I tell kids coming out of college, if you can, go work for someone that you know is really successful. McDonald's is a good example. I mean, look how long they've been in business. Look how they do their business. See how they market. See how they run their operation so that you learn. And then when you want to start your own company, you go to work for someone, you make more money, but at night and weekends, you start testing your ideas so that you don't spend anything. Cash flow is king. If you think you can go out with a month's worth of cash to start something, you're probably going to fail because you're going to stumble a few times. So you want to have enough cash to last 6 months to a year, no matter what you do. So you work for someone else, build up your funds, and then start working it. When you start getting your cash flow and you can see your cash flow is enough now to quit that first job, you're going to be much more successful. And I think that's an important trait people forget about, that they quit too darn early. And the other is surround yourself with good people. If you're starting a company, make sure you have an accountant, a lawyer, some salespeople who will just volunteer for fun. People like me that are retired, just like to give advice, so that you have experts, because most entrepreneurs are awful operational folks. So you want to have someone to kind of say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Then if you can become really successful, then you can pay them as a board or give them some stock in your company.
Yeah. So Terry, I'm thinking about you're coming up with these big ideas for the zoo. Now, that used to be a government organization, then it went to a nonprofit. So are you pitching these ideas to your board of directors?
No, if you have a good board of directors, you do the idea. And if you have something really strong, say, I'd like to try it. Then they shoot it, say, yeah, this is good. How about this? How about this? So when you're all done, you flushed it out a little bit, and then you use your team to really go out and execute. And you have to have the whole team on board.
Yep.
This is where we came back to your idea of COT, and I call it consider or throw away. You had a great saying for it too. But the idea that I found when I went to the lottery was, as government employees, I would walk in and say, hey, let's paint the wall yellow. Let's do this. Let's do that. Because I learned in my own company, I went out and had some wine in San Francisco. And you're going to find out we're bouncing all over the place here. This is always tough for an interview.
I like it. It works for me.
So out in California, when you go in, I always thought that the wineries would just go out back, pick up their grapes that they grew, bring it in, and we'll win all the awards. No. The person that makes the wine goes all over the valley because there's different soil temperatures, different weather conditions that summer. And they pick, say, 100 grapes to find that one that's going to be the award winner. And what I like to do is do this consider or throw away idea that you tell people, we're going to get together, we're going to brainstorm, and you get that bushel basket and you spend 15 minutes to try to get 100 ideas. No idea is a bad idea. Every idea is a great idea. You put them all together because your lawyers and the accountants are always going to be like this as you're trying to come up with the ideas. You're saying no bad idea is bad. You can't do any negative feeling here. Just let's get them in the bucket, and then take a break, come back, and have everybody prioritize in their mind 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that you have the best ones rise to the top. Now you've had the majority of people really like these 2 or 3 ideas. They are going to be behind it because you did it as a team, and they will execute it and they'll follow through much more. So as a group brainstorming, it's a great idea. But as individuals, we go home at night. You'd probably do this. You're laying in bed and that Terry, he was bouncing around, but what if we did this? So we start thinking, how do we get our own ideas at night? And the theory is, make sure you have a pencil and paper beside your bed. And then if you want to send me an idea, because I would say, let's paint the wall yellow. And people would come in, the management staff would say, we can't do it. What? You're giving us too many ideas. We can't do all this. And I said, no. You hear about the king who yells, oh, poop, and everybody goes to the bathroom. Well, they thought because the boss said it, they had to do it. I said, no, I'm looking for ideas. So let's come up with something so that that it's an idea, not a demand that you'll lose your job. So we came up with, if you're sending me an email, do action required. That means you got to do it. That's job changing. Second one was FYI, for your information. Yeah, you could kind of do that because it might have some technical information for our next discussion. But the majority of what we started sending back and forth was COT, consider or throw away, which means just send it to me, but I don't want you to react to it. I'm not going to react to it. If I send you one, you can throw it away if you're busy. We just need to get them off our chest. We just need to get an innovative environment within our organization to think about all these, keep them all in one place, then go back as a second step. See, first step, daring to dream. Next steps, daring to act. And in that act, everybody prioritizes the top ones, and then you let those rise to the top. And now you've got some really good ideas that your crew is going to be behind.
That's a powerful process. But what I really love about it is that don't respond to me. I'm not asking for any feedback at this point. Just consider or throw away.
Yeah.
Because too often people feel they have to act.
I've got one last story in this. The receptionist. Probably he talks to more customers than anybody, right? But she sees an old crappy chair that people have sat in 20 years. It's stained. It's going to break. And she's going to write something. Well, what does she do in today's world? She writes it down and puts it in the suggestion box. Well, maybe 2 weeks later, someone reads it, but then they don't want to make her mad, right away. If they're going to say, no, it can't work. We don't have the money or whatever. So they send it here to here. And she's, in the meantime, down in the break room going, management never listens to me, right? It's exactly what you hear. Well, in this case, now she can send it to everybody in the organization and put COT on it. And she's given an idea that someone might say, well, that chair isn't there, but what if we put in a warming chair or a dog chair too? And blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden you're building on ideas because she knows she's not going to get a response, but she knows someone has read it and now she has input and she can be a lot more creative, not worrying about her job.
Well, yeah, and she might not ever just say, let's fix this chair. It might be much better, right? And so the people coming in just go, wow, this is so cool. I feel so recognized, right? I was taught when I was young that the receptionist, the first person you see, they know what's happening.
They're the
So
power.
pay attention to that. Yeah.
You brought up
Yeah.
a really good second point that I made the mistake of, and you mirrored me in that she would know this or that. The biggest thing you can make a mistake is in today's world, it's so different than it was 20 years ago in brainstorming and doing a brainstorming session. And that is if everybody around the table looks like you're not going to get the best idea, because in today's world, you can sell to the world. So you want every different kind of nationality, race, creed, color in the room giving ideas, because you've got a much wider audience and you're going to make a lot more money. That's why you really get the bosses that aren't as diverse thinking as most. You're going to sell a lot more money if you can sell to the entire market rather than just a real little small part within it. So that's a real important part to think of when you're brainstorming too.
Yeah. It's my biggest lesson about brainstorming is to keep my mouth shut if I'm the leader, because you just know that people are going to say, it sounds like you're telling us to do this, right? So, no, we're talking ideas here.
Bingo.
You're going to figure it out. But I think that was one of my best lessons in doing that. And also letting some of the leaders who are used to having the answers. I remember very clearly telling this one guy, he was so charismatic and he was really smart. He almost always had the solution. I said, I'm going to ask you to do a really hard thing today because we're doing planning with his whole agency. I said, I'm going to ask you not to speak unless I ask you to speak. And he looked at me and he goes, really? I said, yeah, you need to hear what everybody says first, because once you talk, the conversation will stop. It'll all start sounding like you.
I think that you hit one. I would add one to that to say, if you can't resist the urge to say something, just compliment an idea from the very lowest of the chain of command, because now you've got a friend and you've got people who will then endorse your idea.
Awesome. Yeah. I think it was great. It was
You're
fun.
thinking the right way. Yeah.
Well, I had a history with him, so I knew that I could push him further and he'd be okay with it. It was like, no, you can't talk. So, but I do want to talk. You have a documentary that's in the works or coming out, or can you share about that?
Sure. Well, you can tell I love ideas, and I think we've got about 3/4 of our bushel basket filled with very wild, crazy ideas. But when I went to the lottery, I like marketing, I like promotion, and a year in, I get a call to say, hey, we got a problem. Okay, we need to sell more. I can handle that. They said, no, we think we've had a fraud. Somebody called, and we think somehow this is just too screwy, $16.5 million. We haven't had a winner for 11 months. So they called and said, just send me the money. I'm going to send you the ticket. That doesn't sound quite right. What do we do? I was on a cruise ship. I said, well, hang on to it. We aren't going to pay. We'll let it go to court, because if we give it to them and it's fraudulent, then we'll do that. So we spent almost 4 or 5 years trying to figure out who the heck bought this ticket, and ultimately found that it was an internal deal, an internal fraud, someone within a lottery organization. It wasn't our lottery. It was a national lottery organization who wrote the code, combined the code, and oversaw the drawings for this game that gave away $16.5 million. And guess what? We ultimately figured out he bought the ticket, then gave it to a friend. And we looked back and we found, almost 5 or 6 from all over the United States that he'd given to friends and people to cash for him. He just got greedy on this one. And here's the thing that I learned. If you're running a business, you're running a nonprofit organization. Nonprofits are notorious because the National Association of Fraud Examiners, there's a three pyramid with 3 sides. Here are the 3 things that you got to watch for. Number 1, somebody who's got financial problems. If you know somebody's going through a divorce, if they've got gambling problems, drug problems, gambling problems, whatever, they're ripe for fraud. They get to the point where I just got to get some more money in, and they aren't going to miss this money over here. But there are 2 other things they have to have before they actually can pull the trigger. The second one is opportunity. So an accountant in a small school district or church that writes the purchase orders and writes the checks, you're pretty ripe for fraud if they have a demand for money and they have the opportunity. But the third one is the toughest part as a supervisor to figure out, and that is rationale. The fraud we had, and as I researched this, most of the people, when they finally got caught, and they will be caught because they start small and get bigger and bigger and just get too darn greedy. But at the end, they'll always say, well, Sue over here is making more money than I am, and I'm working harder. I deserved that money. And so having the financial need and, oh my gosh, I've got to get some more money. They have the opportunity, and many of us as leaders have those opportunities. And then finally, the rationale of I deserve it usually would cause fraud. So we busted this, three of them. And there's one question, or a couple questions I learned that will help you in investigating fraud and learning what happens when somebody steals from you. One is when they come in and say, do you want to be the defendant or do you want to be the witness? Most everybody will say witness. And that one's always kind of a easy one. The second one is, if you do anything illegal for the past 10 years, you do not want to have been on social media or your cell phone, because that's the first place cops check to see who you know, because we just looked at the original guy's social media and we saw all the people who are on it. We cross-referenced that to all the winners nationally and immediately found our other people who had won illegally. So that was something I never ever want to go through. And the basic premise is make sure you have checks and balances. Don't let someone write the checks that's doing POs, that's doing the granting the contracts out for people. You want to have separations of duties, and that's a good lesson learned.
That's a hard lesson learned too. So I want to shift to be a little less lighthearted, because this is a question that has been coming up in my interviews, also in just side discussions. I've watched back and forth things going on, and there are nonprofits who rely heavily on grants, and now they don't know if they're getting their grants. There's hints they might not, but because everything's kind of in flux, even their most reliable funders are in that, well, we have to wait and see mode, right? So what advice might you give a nonprofit leader and their team at this point in the economy right now?
I think as you remember the zoo stories, think about research and development. Every large organization has an R&D. You should take a small portion of your people and money and start thinking today, what could we do if we don't have the money from this funding source? Where do we go next? And not always rely on everyone else. Should we start, if you're running an art center and it's free admission, should we start charging $1 or $2 and $3? Then do as we did, let the people who can't afford it in free quietly as they come in and you see them, oh, I don't know if we can afford this. Let them in free, but you're going to make more money that way. Or look around and see, do you have assets? You know, some people have land. They have other ways that they could raise more money. But you always want to look successful, and you always want to be a positive when you're going out. We're going to shoot this dog if you don't give it to the Animal Rescue League. Works for maybe a week, but it does not do long term. You know, look at this dog. Would find ways. We're gonna save this dog. It's so exciting. Look what it could do today. You're always looking for positive things, but you want to have 2 or 3 in your saddlebag before you ride out and talk to the public, because you are going to hit those. If you are relying everything on 1 or 2 sources, you'll probably be in trouble at some point. Somebody will slow you down, and that, I'm telling you, is the most frustrating thing. So you always want to be looking forward and looking for that, testing that second and third, and be ready to pull it if you need it.
So as a very successful leader yourself, let's just say we have this 10% in place, and I've got a couple of staff, but maybe I can't hire out like regular R&D people. How do you get people set on, like, what do you say to them? Like, here's what I'm asking you to do. This is what we're trying to find out, because it may not exist yet, right? So how do you give instruction to go out and look for those innovative ideas, Terry?
I think you do as you talked, and we talked a little bit ago, start brainstorming, but bring in your biggest either donors or your biggest supporters, which are your board, usually board members, and say, hey, here's where we're at. Let's think of some ways to do that. Are we going to have house parties? Are we going to do walks? Are we going to let's do the golf outing this year? And just say, hey, we lost this, but we're going to have some fun with that. If you can help us out, we love it. Everything is positive, and then really celebrate and say thank you to those. I remember when I first walked in, there were 2 big donors that had never been thanked for their big donation when the city ran it, because, you know, and then they felt like I'm just giving it back to the city, you know, and they didn't even care. I'm paying my taxes anyway. So you got to make sure you're appreciated to those that give money. But you're really in the two things I found in a nonprofit that really make it so much easier is if you don't have to go out and beg for money every year, which means you get people through the door and there are things that they want to pay money for, galas, special guests, lectures, that sort of thing. And you bring them in to have it. And the second is when you are doing well, start an endowment and get that endowment started early so that people who have wills 3 years from now, 10 years from now, put in their will any kind of amounts for you to have an endowment. Why do you want an endowment? Because then you get 10% or 5%, 5% is typical, of all of that money for the rest of your life. So when COVID hit the zoo, we had a $16 million endowment when it was almost zero when I walked in. So we knew we could survive no matter what when others were begging and scrunching for money. So yeah. Just like people like success in business and families and personal lives, people like nonprofits that are successful and will give to those because they know that that's a benefit that they know will be around for a long time.
Terry, you have given so much wisdom today.
Do we get our bucket full?
No, not quite. I have one more question for you.
Okay. Hey, I want to give you $1 million idea that anybody can take and then put into a nonprofit when we're done. So don't have to mention that to you. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Give us the $1 million idea. That might be
at the end here. At the end.
Yeah. Okay. So I would like to ask you to think back to all the different things you've done and try and pick one. I'm sure you have many, but one of the most surprising lessons you've learned during that time, like that you never expected to learn, that has kind of been a thread throughout your entire life.
I think I learned it early from my dad. He went through the Depression and he wouldn't buy anything unless he could pay cash for it. So cash flow is king, no doubt about that. The second, which I never really learned, is how to relax. I wish I'd learned more about that. A guy named, he's on Shark Tank. I did an event with him a few weeks ago, and he was writing some things down before the show. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm writing down 5 things. I do it at night, and then I also revise it in the morning." I said, "You have that many $1 million ideas coming at you?" He said, "No." He says, "I'm writing down the 5 things I'm going to start to do tomorrow morning for me," which things like I'm going to have bacon. I haven't had bacon for a long time. I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm going to make my bed today because then I've accomplished something. So he accomplishes something, puts his mind in the right mood. So when he steps out to help other people, he's in a great mood because he's done something for himself first. Now, that's not selfish. That's just motivation to keep you going.
Terry, I have to tell you what, that is great. Now, tell me your $1 million idea.
Okay, so I helped with the lottery, and so we merged Powerball and Mega Millions during the recession of 2008. And they asked me to think of an idea to help promote Mega Millions. And so, we kind of did some brainstorming, but again, back to consider a throwaway. I told them, let's all, send in ideas as we think about it, because you usually think about it in the shower or while you're sleeping at night, and you can't sleep at night. I looked up driving home and I saw the moon, and it was a crescent moon. You know what I mean? It's kind of a thumbnail. Oh my God, let's get a laser or a spotlight. Let's own the moon for a billboard. And so I started calling around to astrophysicists to say, hey, how do we do this? And they said, well, you can't go through the atmosphere. It'll all break up. So you got to send the signal a little further out and make sure it's good and bright. So I got to get a hold of Elon Musk. I think we could probably do that and own the moon put the jackpot up, or we can put Sarah's name up, on the moon.
So did you do it?
Well, until I can get Elon or somebody who owns a satellite outside the atmosphere, I'm still trying to break through that barrier.
Well, he's a little busy right now. You might have to hang on.
Okay. Can I give you one more? You have time for one more?
I have time for one more.
Okay. So remember Scoop on Poop? I don't know how I get on this subject, but I had a small town call me. They were kind of, didn't make much money. And they said, we're a quarter of a mile off the interstate. We're exit 88. And we don't have anybody pulling in to see us. We need to get commerce going. We have 50,000 cars going down the interstate. What do we do? Well, we brainstorm. Okay, you have gas. Everybody needs gas. Everybody needs food. You got McDonald's at most rest stops. But you know what you don't have? Everybody needs bathrooms, clean bathrooms. I said, build a great big building with clean bathrooms. Let's do 20 stalls on this side, 20 on this side. Let's decorate them differently. Let's get Gerber to give us free stools and everything, all their new stuff to do research. We'll get Charmin to give us free toilet paper to test out toilet papers. We'll sell Tootsie Rolls, Baby Ruths. We'll have a dog place, for dog resting, and outhouses for pictures. We'll sell Baby Ruths. So, we'll do all this. I got pooped out in Menlo, Iowa. But the best part was we knew we wouldn't have to do no publicity because kings, we could bring in a king to sit on the throne to kick it off. Every late night talk show would be talking about it for weeks. Well, they didn't want to be known as the poop capital of the world, so they didn't do it. But I know that idea is going to work somewhere.
It would work for me because knowing it's like those things, I just need to do these 3 things. So it's like why there's rest stops that we always stop at because they have exactly what you're talking about, right?
But the bathrooms are dirty, right? You got to have somebody there cleaning.
No, these guys, they're so high traffic. The bathrooms are always clean, which is amazing in itself. Good. And there's a nature area to walk your dogs. They just took out their candy.
They stole our idea.
I don't know that they did, but they probably figured, hey, it's either here or they're going to pull over and just wreck the natural beauty. So, but I love that idea.
I bet that place didn't have what this place had. Their exit was 88. So I'm going to do Burma shave signs all over the U.S. saying, urinate at exit 88. I don't know.
I say keep working on it. That might not be the top 3, but keep working on it.
I like the moon idea better.
I do too. I think that's so cool. Hey, so Terry, I'm going to ask you to take us out with a final thought, and then that'll be it for our chat.
After all is said and done, a lot is said and a little is done. I think you need to act. So after leaving us today, you have a few ideas that you may have thought of. So dare to dream, put them all in the bushel basket. But remember, dare to act. If you don't act, you cannot make a lot of money and, more importantly, help a lot of people.
Thanks so much. And hey, listeners, come back next week because we're going to have another great episode.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.